3 years. 3 long years of not knowing where the floor actually was under my own 2 feet. I'm Robert. I'm 83, and there was a stretch, not that long ago, all things considered, when I'd get out of bed at night and have to grab the dresser because my feet couldn't tell my brain where the ground actually was. That's not clumsiness. That's numbness, so complete it steals your balance along with your sensation. Today I climb my own stairs without touching the railing. I carry my own groceries in from the car in one trip, both arms loaded. I'm telling you that up front because everything I'm about to say only matters if you believe it's coming from someone who actually lives it. Here's what confuses people. Numbness isn't a light switch. It doesn't turn off in one traumatic moment. It creeps, worse some nights, a little better on others, until you can't remember the last time your feet felt fully, reliably yours. That was 3 years of my life. What changed it wasn't a new medication. It was one dinner habit. And before I tell you what it was, I want you to understand why it worked. Because the what without the why is just another thing people try for 2 weeks and quit. Doctors and researchers have studied for decades why blood sugar tends to be worse for people in the morning than any other single measurement of the day, even in people who eat carefully at breakfast. Part of the answer sits at dinner the night before. A heavy dose of refined carbohydrate at your evening meal, white bread, white rice, a big helping of pasta, spikes your blood sugar in the hours right before you lie down for 8 hours of stillness. And it's during those still hours that chronically elevated glucose does some of its quietest damage, sticking to proteins in nerves and blood vessels through a process called glycation, something researchers have studied since the early 2000s as a central mechanism behind diabetic nerve and vessel damage. Research has consistently linked this glycation process to the numbness and burning so many of us carry in our feet. So the habit I changed was simple to describe, harder to actually commit to. I stopped eating bread or rice at dinner, and I replaced that portion of my plate with a slow-digesting protein, specifically a serving of cottage cheese alongside my meal. It sounds almost too plain to matter, but there's a real reason behind it. If your feet burn at night, or go numb, or feel cold no matter how many socks you wear, please don't ignore it. I almost did, and I'm 80 years old. For years I told myself it was just age, the tingling, the heaviness in my legs climbing the stairs. But it wasn't age. It was my blood sugar quietly damaging the nerves and the circulation in my legs, and almost nobody warned me in time. If you let it keep going, those little signals turn into something you can't undo. I wasn't willing to lose my feet or my independence. So I started doing one thing every single day to help support healthy blood sugar and protect my legs. I'll show you exactly what in this video. And if you want the simple support I personally use, there's a free presentation linked in the description below. Cottage cheese is unusually rich in a slow-digesting protein called casein, and research on nighttime protein intake has found that casein releases amino acids gradually over several hours while you sleep, rather than in one quick spike like faster proteins do. That slow, steady release does 2 things worth caring about. It keeps you fuller through the night, which matters if you've ever found yourself snacking at 11 o'clock because dinner didn't hold you. And by displacing refined carbohydrate from your plate, it flattens the blood sugar spike that would otherwise still be climbing when you turn off the lights. Your doctor almost certainly never sat you down and explained any of this. It's not because it isn't real, it's because a typical office visit runs somewhere around 8 minutes, barely time to review your numbers and adjust a prescription, let alone walk through the physiology of evening protein timing. That conversation falls through the cracks of a system stretched too thin, appointment after appointment, year after year. I want to be honest that swapping bread for cottage cheese wasn't the whole story for me. It was the anchor of a small system. Alongside it, I started taking a short walk after dinner, because movement in the 30 to 60 minutes after eating helps your muscles pull glucose out of your bloodstream through a pathway that doesn't even require insulin. I kept my bedroom cooler at night because body temperature plays into the hormone rhythm your body uses to regulate blood sugar while you sleep. And a few nights a week, I soaked my feet in warm water with Epsom salt, which some research links to improved local blood flow, along with a modest amount of absorbable magnesium, a mineral a meaningful share of people with type 2 diabetes run low on. These days, I sleep through the whole night without getting up to shake feeling back into my feet. I drive myself to see my old fishing buddies on Saturdays, which is something I couldn't reliably promise 3 years ago. A man named Ezekiel Marsh wrote to me, 68, a retired welder out of Mobile, Alabama, diabetic for 22 years. He told me the numbness in his feet had gotten so bad he'd started using a cane just to feel confident crossing his own kitchen. He swapped his dinner rice for cottage cheese, added the after-dinner walk, and 8 weeks later told me he'd left the cane by the door for good. Not because the numbness vanished entirely, but because his balance and confidence had come back enough that he didn't need it. I share his story as an honest example, not a promise. Everyone's body responds differently, and this works alongside medical care, not instead of it, never as a substitute for whatever your own doctor has already prescribed for you specifically. Let me be specific about how I actually made the swap, because vague advice is how good habits die in the first week. My old dinner plate had a fist-sized portion of rice or a couple slices of bread sitting next to whatever protein and vegetable I was eating. I didn't try to overhaul the whole plate at once, but I just removed that starch and replaced it with a half cup to a full cup of plain cottage cheese, sometimes with a little black pepper or a few slices of cucumber mixed in, so it didn't feel like eating the same bland thing every night. Some nights I'd have it as a side. Other nights, especially in summer, I'd have it as most of the meal itself, alongside a big serving of vegetables. I also learned, the hard way, that consistency mattered more than perfection. There were nights I slipped back to old habits, a slice of bread here, a bit of pasta there, and I noticed it the next morning almost every time in how my feet felt getting out of bed. That feedback loop, uncomfortable as it was, became its own kind of motivation. My body was telling me, in plain language, which choices it preferred, and after a while I stopped needing willpower to make the right one. It simply became the obvious one. None of this is about deprivation, either. I still eat bread sometimes, just not stacked on top of a day of other refined carbohydrates, and rarely at dinner, when the hours right afterward matter most for how my blood sugar behaves overnight. Moderation with intention beats an all-or-nothing rule that collapses the first time life gets complicated. None of what I'm describing replaces what your doctor has you on. If numbness has been part of your life for a while, that's worth bringing up at your next visit, not as a replacement for treatment, but as something to layer on top of it. I think often about the people my age still walking their own neighborhoods, still climbing into their own cars, still showing up for their grandkids' birthdays, and the ones who've quietly stopped, who now wait for someone else to drive them everywhere. The gap between those two groups usually isn't dramatic. It's a plate, night after night, that either changed or didn't. I've talked to a lot of people my age over the years, and the ones who feel like they've lost the most aren't always the ones with the worst numbers on paper. They're the ones who've stopped trusting their own bodies, who've decided that whatever's going to happen to their feet is already decided, and there's no point paying attention anymore. I understand that feeling. I lived inside it for 3 years. But the body doesn't stop listening just because we stop paying attention to it. It just keeps sending signals into a silence nobody's answering. It's not too late for your feet to feel like yours again. 3 years of numbness didn't undo what my body was still capable of once I gave it the right conditions. That's the part I wish someone had told me during year 1, instead of leaving me to find it on my own in year 3. If you made it this far, you already understand more about your own legs than most people your age ever will. That matters. You know now that the burning, the numbness, the cold feet, they trace back to one thing: blood sugar slowly working against your nerves and circulation. And you know the goal isn't a miracle. It's protecting your ability to stand, to walk, to stay independent. That's why, alongside everything I showed you today, I use a simple daily support to help keep my blood sugar in a healthy range, so my legs keep carrying me where I want to go. I put the free presentation in the description below. Go watch it. And as always, keep working with your doctor. This supports your routine. It doesn't replace it. If you've dealt with numbness like this, tell me in the comments how long it's been going on and what your feet feel like most mornings. I read every single one. And if this dinner swap made sense to you, subscribe, because there's more of this coming.